the news.
Hi, I'm Tessa with Rain Rat News with a few bits of news for you to choke on from March 26th. I'm excited for this one. This one's a gift. Edward Big Balls Korestein, a man who by all accounts should not be allowed near anything more complex than a Wi-Fi router, was secretly helping cyber criminals. He now holds a government job, and not just any government job. He's part of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which is both a real thing and a cruel joke on the American people. Now let's address the big balls in the room, because yes, this man who unironically named himself Big Balls was out here helping a cybercrime ring run a website called dataleak.fun, which, side note, is possibly the most obnoxiously evil name for a hacking website ever. What was Big Balls doing? Oh, just providing DDoS protection and caching services for a group engaged in phone hijacking, because nothing says big balls like stealing people's digital identities, hacking law enforcement emails, gotta make sure those big balls stay one step ahead of the FBI, and harassing an FBI agent. Yes, this man has balls so big they're actively committing felonies. And now, Big Balls has a government clearance. That's right, the US government looked at a man named Big Balls and thought, yeah, let's put that guy in charge of the important systems. I guess national security is when you entrust your networks to a guy who was running IT for a cybercrime gang. The FBI has nothing to say, probably because they're still recovering from the embarrassment of getting trolled by a man who named himself after his own testicles. Or maybe they're too busy updating their threat assessment manuals to include beware of government employees with meme tier hacker names. Elon Musk's fingerprints are all over this mess. Of course, his Department of Government Efficiency is staffed by guys who sound like rejected GTA Online characters. DOGE security is apparently being run like a Discord server for 14-year-old script kiddies. At this point, we should just assume that the entire government is one bad Steam password away from collapse. The real question here is, how does it end? Because either Big Balls mysteriously resigns the next 48 hours and quietly disappears into the tech startup world where he'll probably end up running cybersecurity for Truth Social, or Trump defends him, claiming the FBI investigation was woke and that real patriots have huge balls, and he gets promoted because, let's be honest, this administration is on a mission to replace every competent government worker with the biggest walking red flag they can find. America, baby, where even cyber criminals have big balls. Oh look, another example of the Trump administration proving that national security is just a punchline to them. This time, they managed to accidentally leak sensitive military plans in a Signal group chat, because apparently the Pentagon now operates like a group project gone horribly wrong. Some of Trump's top goons, including Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, were casually discussing U.S. military strikes against Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthi forces in an encrypted Signal chat. No big deal, just your everyday war planning, except they accidentally added journalist Jeffrey Goldberg to the chat. After being accused of lying, the investigative journalist was kind enough to publish all of the chats. This was after he did the right thing and reported the breach to officials. Now Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, who at this point has probably aged 20 years in the past 3 months alone, are demanding a Justice Department investigation into whether this violated the Espionage Act, which, to be fair, seems like a reasonable concern when your national security strategy is indistinguishable from a boomer accidentally hitting reply all on a work email. Meanwhile, Trump's national security brain trust is in full damage control mode. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and CIA Director John Radcliffe swear that no classified information was shared, which is interesting because the leaked chat included details on airstrike timing and coordination, which seems exactly like the kind of thing you don't want casually floating around in unsecured group texts. Hegseth, of course, denied everything. Waltz, however, actually admitted to the colossal screw-up and said an internal investigation will follow. Good. The people responsible for the mess will be investigating themselves. I'm sure that they'll be totally fair and thorough. And let's not forget Signal in all this. The app's president, Meredith Whittaker, came out swinging, saying that the problem isn't Signal, it's the absolute buffoons using it. Signal's encryption is rock solid, but that doesn't help when the people in charge of national security have the operational discipline of a middle school group chat. So what's the takeaway here? Besides the obvious Trump's administration is a chaotic mess of incompetence and self-inflicted disasters, maybe that military strategy shouldn't be handled like a high school friend group planning a surprise party. Maybe we shouldn't have literal war plans one accidental wrong contact away from being leaked to the press. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to let the most powerful government on earth be run by people who struggle with basic technology. At this rate, our next war strategy is going to get leaked on Reddit. Oh neat, Trump is back at it again, trying to gut teacher training programs because nothing says make America great again like making sure our educators are underqualified and overwhelmed. Of course, this isn't just about saving money, because God forbid Republicans ever cut military spending or corporate subsidies. No, this is about killing anything that even remotely smells like diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because in MAGA land, teacher shortages are fine, but making sure those teachers understand marginalized communities, now that's a national emergency. The lawsuit is part of Trump's larger effort to torch the entire Department of Education, because according to the Republican Brain Trust, the federal government should only exist to ban abortion, bomb brown people, and give billionaires tax breaks. Educating the next generation? Not our problem. States can handle it. Yeah, because that's worked out so well for Texas, where they are banning books about Rosa Parks. But let's get into the real impact here. The programs Trump wants to kill aren't some woke indoctrination camps. They're meant to help fix the massive teacher shortages, especially in areas that have been historically underserved. You know, rural schools, low-income schools, places the GOP loves to say they care about, you know, real Americans. But as always, Republicans love the working class in theory, right up until they have to actually help them. The Department of Education is arguing that these teacher training programs promote divisive ideologies, you know, like teaching kids that slavery happened, or that LGBTQ people exist, or that Native Americans didn't just peacefully relocate to reservations. Republicans call this indoctrination, but what they actually mean is history we don't like because it makes us look bad. They want teachers trained in real American values, which at this point I assume means handing out guns with math textbooks and replacing the science curriculum with excerpts from Trump's Truth Social posts. Now it's up to the conservative stuffed Supreme Court, who probably will pretend to thoughtfully consider it before rubber stamping Trump's Destroy Education Act. This is the same court that overturned Roe v. Wade, the same court that basically said corporations have more rights than you do, and now they're going to decide whether we should intentionally make teachers worse at their jobs, because that's really what it's about, dumbing down the next generation. Republicans aren't trying to fix education, they're trying to break it. An uneducated public is easier to control. It's easier to sell them on conspiracy theories. It's easier to make them hate immigrants, easier to make them think tax cuts for billionaires will trickle down any day now. So what happens next? Either Trump wins and we get an entire generation of teachers trained by YouTube conspiracy videos, or the Supreme Court actually upholds basic logic for once. Either way, expect more attacks on education, more book bans, and more conservatives screaming about wokeness while their kids struggle to read at a 5th grade level. Welcome to the future of education in America, where the only thing they want kids to learn is how to say, "Yes, Mr. Musk," and "I swear I don't remember slavery happening." So Trump gutted the federal workforce, and China is swooping in like a capitalist vulture with a communist flag. Who could have possibly predicted that when you fire thousands of skilled workers, some might be desperate enough to take a sketchy job offer? He fired a massive chunk of the federal workforce, including experts in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and national defense. And now, surprise, surprise, foreign intelligence networks are sniffing around like a dog that just heard a steak hit the floor. This isn't some masterstroke of Chinese espionage. They didn't have to launch an elaborate hacking operation or send in deep cover spies. All they had to do was wait for Trump to make his own government so dysfunctional that its experts were out on the street looking for work. Now these former federal workers who spent their careers safeguarding US interests are getting job offers from mysterious headhunting firms that just happen to have ties to China. What a coincidence. I'm sure it's just a totally normal recruiting strategy and not an attempt to casually slip an ex-NSA analyst into a Beijing think tank. According to this investigation, this secretive network is using fake consulting firms to lure these workers in, which is wild because usually when a consulting firm scams you, they just steal your money, not your classified expertise. And it's all perfectly legal because, shocker, Trump and his Republican lackeys have gutted oversight agencies, meaning there's basically no mechanism to stop former government employees from jumping ship to work with a foreign entity. Did you think there were strict safeguards in place? No. Researchers haven't found a direct connection between these companies and the Chinese government, which is just the kind of plausible deniability intelligence agencies love. China doesn't need to formally employ these ex-feds. They just need their expertise funneled through enough shell companies and middlemen until it lands exactly where they want it. Before the GOP starts screaming about China, maybe they should take a moment to reflect on how their own guys' policies made this mess in the first place. Trump torched the federal workforce, and now foreign adversaries are sifting through the wreckage, picking up whatever useful scraps they can find. This isn't some grand Chinese Chinese heist. It's the natural consequence of letting a corrupt, incompetent administration hollow out the government. But sure, let's hear another person rant about how Biden was weak on China while they let Trump hand over national security on a silver platter. Ah yes, the geopolitical equivalent of a drunk guy at a bar trying to buy someone's girlfriend. Trump is back at it again, reviving his totally sane, absolutely not embarrassing obsession with purchasing Greenland, because a stable genius is someone who tries to buy a place that doesn't want to be sold. Trump has managed to turn a wholesome sporting event into an international diplomatic incident. Originally, Usha Vance, wife of Vice President J.D. Vance, was supposed to attend this dog sled race. I'm assuming just smiled awkwardly while pretending the US isn't trying to annex the host, but Denmark saw right through it. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called this visit unacceptable pressure on Greenland, which is a very diplomatic way of saying, get the hell out of here with your land grab fantasy. So now, instead of letting Usha Vance wave at sled dogs like some kind of colonial overlord in waiting, the US delegation is scaling back and only visiting Bidufik Space Base, the one place in Greenland where they won't get booed out of the room. Greenland isn't for sale, and it never was, but Trump's ego doesn't accept no as an answer, so now we're back in this awkward situation where Denmark has to calmly explain to the leader of the United States that territories aren't impulse purchases. Denmark has every reason to be annoyed. The last time Trump floated this Greenland nonsense, he got so mad that Denmark refused to let him that he canceled a state visit. Imagine throwing an international tantrum because a territory won't let you buy it. And now with tensions flaring again, Greenlanders were actually planning to protest against American interference. That's right, Trump has managed to make Greenland so mad that they decided to organize mass demonstrations. Do you know how hard that is? These people literally live on ice. Protesting is just standing outside freezing to death faster. And yet they were ready to do it because they're sick of Trump treating their homeland like a monopoly board. The US didn't graciously scale back this visit. They chickened out because Denmark and Greenland made it clear they weren't playing along with Trump's latest fever dream. Well, that ceasefire lasted about as long as a New Year's resolution. On March 25th, 2025, the US somehow convinced Ukraine and Russia to agree to separate ceasefires, aimed at stopping attacks on the Black Sea and each other's energy infrastructure. A bold move, considering that Russia treats agreements the same way Trump treats subpoenas, completely optional. Within hours of signing, Russia launched drone strikes across Ukraine, proving once again that diplomatic agreements with Moscow have the shelf life of an avocado. At this point, if Putin signed a deal saying, "I won't punch you in the face," you'd need a helmet within the hour. Ukrainian President Zelensky confirmed that multiple cities were hit because, surprise, Russia doesn't actually stop attacking just because they said they would. Meanwhile, the Kremlin, in a breathtaking display of what the hellery, accused Ukraine of attacking Russian energy facilities while they were still in negotiations. Yeah, the classic Putin playbook. Bomb your neighbor, cry victim, demand concessions. But hold on a second, Moscow has new conditions. They won't follow the Black Sea security deal unless the West lifts sanctions on their agricultural and fertilizer exports, which, by the way, aren't even directly sanctioned. So what is making it difficult for Russia to ship its wheat and chemical cocktail? Restrictions on things like finance, insurance, port maintenance, and Russian-flagged vessels. In other words, basic consequences for invading a sovereign nation. But Putin is acting like he's the real victim, tragically unable to spread his manure, literally and figuratively, across the world. The Kremlin argues that these barriers are preventing them from reaching their full agricultural export potential. The rest of the world argues that invading and bombing countries tends to be bad for business. So we can expect more of the same. Russia will keep attacking, keep pretending to be the victim, keep demanding that the West reward them for their destruction. Meanwhile, Ukraine will have to continue fighting for survival because unlike Moscow, they actually honor agreements, like, existing within their own borders. A U.S. judge has ruled that the Biden administration overstepped its authority when it canceled oil and gas leases in Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, meaning drilling in one of the planet's last untouched wilderness areas is back on the menu. In a classic Trump move, these leases, covering over 365,000 acres, were shoved through in the final days of his first presidency, because what a better farewell gift than irreversible environmental destruction. Biden's team tried to undo them, citing little things like climate change, ecosystem devastation, and the fact that fossil fuels are literally cooking the planet. U.S. District Judge Sharon Gleason wasn't having it. She ruled that because the 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Act mandated drilling in ANWR, which is a crazy thing to mandate in a tax law. The Interior Department couldn't just cancel the leases without a court order. So just in time for Trump's second term, he gets the case handed right back to his administration. So naturally, Alaskan officials are thrilled and ready to get to work turning protected lands into an oil-soaked wasteland. The state's Republican leadership is already salivating at the prospect of more fossil fuel extraction, hyping this up as a win for energy independence, because apparently the US needs to be independent from renewables and stuck forever in the loving embrace of big oil. Trump gets to push his fossil fuel agenda even harder using a tax law as his legal basis. Alaska's fragile ecosystem? Who cares? Get ready for pipelines, rigs, and an oil spill or two, because prosperity is dead caribou and poisoned water. Climate activists and conservationists are screwed. This ruling could set a precedent that once an administration sells off public lands to oil companies, there's no easy way to reverse it. So enjoy the view while you can. Soon it might just be another Exxon parking lot. The Trump administration is back on its favorite pastime, rounding up foreigners like it's some dystopian scavenger hunt. This time, U.S. immigration authorities detained a Turkish doctoral student from Tufts University, revoked her visa, and left everyone, including the university, scrambling for answers. There is zero official explanation for why this student was targeted, but let's be honest, this isn't about immigration violations, it's about politics. The Trump administration has been ramping up its crackdown on international students and pro-Palestinian activists, and if you happen to be both, well, good luck. There is zero official explanation for why this student was targeted, but let's be honest, this isn't about immigration violations, it's about politics. The Trump administration has been ramping up its crackdown on international students and pro-Palestinian activists, and if you happen to be both, well, good luck. At Brown University, a Lebanese professor was deported because someone found photos on her phone that were allegedly sympathetic to Hezbollah, which she refutes. At Cornell and Georgetown, students are also being targeted because apparently being in college while foreign is now a national security threat. The message is loud and clear. If you're a foreign student, especially from the Middle East, shut up or get deported. The Trump administration isn't going after terrorists. It's using that label as a political bludgeon to silence dissent. There's no due process, no hearings, no explanations, just a knock on the door, a revoked visa, and a one-way ticket out of the country. It's a purge disguised as immigration enforcement. And if you think this stops at international students, think again. Today it's foreign nationals. Tomorrow it'll be US citizens who happen to have the wrong opinions. Because once a government starts deporting people for protesting, it is only a matter of time before they start locking up citizens for doing the same. Yes, another day, another blatant corruption scandal from the Trump administration. This time, it's Emile Bovee, a high-ranking official in the Justice Department, allegedly ordering the destruction of evidence related to a meeting about dropping corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Because when you're part of Trump's inner circle, crime isn't just a side hustle, it's the whole business model. Eric Adams, the NYC mayor, is in legal hot water, accused of accepting bribes from Turkish officials. The Justice Department was considering dropping the charges, because why wouldn't Trump's DOJ want to let a corrupt politician off the hook? Former federal prosecutor Danielle Sassoon says she was explicitly told to shred notes from a meeting about this case. The guy giving the order? Emile Bovee, who naturally denies everything, because that's what Trump's officials do when caught red-handed. Now, any normal administration, this would be a major scandal, but under Trump, it's just Tuesday. Sassoon, who resigned in protest, says she's documented all of this in a draft letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, the same Pam Bondi who previously declined to prosecute Trump's scam university after receiving a nice campaign donation from him. The Justice Department hasn't even made a final decision on whether to let Adams walk free, which means this whole saga isn't over yet. Under Trump, the Justice Department doesn't fight corruption, it buries it. Literally in this case, under a pile of shredded notes. If you ever get caught breaking the law, just remember, the real crime isn't committing the act, it's failing to properly destroy the evidence. Donald Trump has once again decided that democracy is simply too inconvenient for his taste, signing an executive order aimed at overhauling US elections, or more accurately, making it harder for the wrong people to vote. The order demands that all voter registrations require documentary proof of citizenship, because apparently, Republicans are under the impression that millions of undocumented immigrants are just dying to risk deportation for the thrill of standing in line at a high school gymnasium to vote. Well, if you don't have a passport or government-issued ID, ID handy? Tough luck. Are you a married woman who changed her last name? Hope you didn't really want to participate in that whole democracy thing. But wait, there's more. Trump is also taking aim at mail-in voting, another longtime Republican boogeyman. Under the new rules, all ballots must be received by Election Day, meaning that if you mailed your vote on time, but the post office was too slow, perhaps because a certain Trump lackey deliberately sabotaged that back in 2020, your vote simply doesn't count. Efficiency. Naturally, Trump is justifying this with his usual song and dance about election fraud, which always translates to, I still can't get over losing in 2020. And while he claims this is all about protecting the sacred integrity of elections, legal experts are standing by, politely reminding him that running elections is, in fact, a state responsibility, meaning that this executive order is about as legally airtight as one of his old bankrupt casinos. Critics are already warning that these changes will disproportionately screw over marginalized voters, specifically the poor, elderly, and those who don't have easy access to documentation. But let's be real, that's kind of the point, because when Trump talks about election integrity, what he really means is let's make voting as difficult as possible for people who won't vote for me. The order also directs federal agencies to help identify non-citizens on voter rolls, which sounds a lot like the GOP's favorite pastime, pretending undocumented immigrants are voting in droves while conveniently ignoring actual voter suppression. And just to make it extra Orwellian, Trump is rolling back previous policies that expanded voter access, because as always, if something helps more people vote, Republicans assume it must be a scam. So what'll happen next? Expect lawsuits, so many lawsuits, because while Trump and his cronies are determined to turn the electoral process into an obstacle course, the Constitution does still exist for now. But if this order stands, get ready for an election where proving you're a citizen is harder than buying a gun, and where your mail-in ballot is more likely to be counted if you vote red. That's all for Brain Rot News. Like and subscribe before satire becomes classified as domestic terrorism.